Hello, I'm Don Beyer, and I represent Virginia's 8th District in the U.S. Congress. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this event, unmasking Egypt's political propaganda towards Coptic Christians. Egypt continues to be an important ally for us in the region, which is why it's critical that we hold them to high standards when it comes to human rights abuses. To that end, last year, on the 10th anniversary of the Egyptian resolution, I, along with my colleague and my friend, co-chair Representative Tom Malinowski from New Jersey, we formed the Egyptian Human Rights Caucus. We've already been able to celebrate significant legislative wins through our work in this caucus, such as passing an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which forces the State Department to report on how many political prisoners remain in Egyptian custody. We've also successfully pushed for the initiation of a government study of instances of harassment and intimidation of U.S. citizens and nationals committed by foreign governments, and the challenges that our government has faced adhering to U.S. law that bars the provision of aid and security to these countries. Most recently, our caucus has been advocating for the release of Alaa Abd el-Fattah. He's an Egyptian activist, software developer, and blogger. He's currently serving a 5-year sentence in prison on spurious broadcasting false news charges. While in custody, Alaa has been tortured, beaten, robbed, and denied the basic essentials to maintain good health. Sadly, Alaa is not an isolated case. There are between 20,000 and 60,000 political prisoners in Egypt who are subject to all kinds of abuse. And this has instilled a culture of repression and fear that discourages free political expression. The U.S. provides Egypt with more than $1 billion annually in security assistance. They're the number 2 country in the world to receive American support. And due to the assistance and the efforts of human rights advocates, we've only recently begun conditioning that aid, saying you don't get all the aid if you don't live up to some of the human rights standards. So I was really pleased to see that the Biden administration withheld $130 million in foreign military financing to Egypt for the 2nd consecutive year. It's not right for an Egyptian government to treat U.S. assistance as an entitlement. You just automatically get it. And it doesn't serve our interest to reinforce that perception. But I'm concerned that we're not going far enough, not just on political prisoners, but also on religious freedom. Egypt has been placed on the special watch list by the U.S. Commission on Religious Freedom for systematic and ongoing religious freedom violations. I'm an American. Almost every group that has come to our country over the 240 years has come to escape religious repression someplace else. We are an incredibly diverse religious culture, and I think that's one of our great strengths. And I believe, too, that the Coptic community has the absolute right to live without fear of persecution for your religious expression. So I join in Coptic Solidarity's call to remove religion from the ID card, to pass a unified worship law, and to promote freedom of religious expression. Through my work in Congress, I remain committed to advocating for basic human rights in Egypt. We must do all that we can to stop the unlawful and extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, torture, arbitrary detention, politically motivated reprisals, violent targeting of the LGBTQ plus community, and especially restrictions on religious expression and political participation. This is what freedom means. This is what a free democracy means. So thank you so much for this Coptic Solidarity event, and thank you for the invitation to address you today.
Good afternoon, and thank you for providing me the opportunity to provide remarks for the 7th Annual Modern Coptic Martyrs Remembrance Day. I'm so blessed to have a wonderful Coptic community in the Tampa Bay area. I have attended many prayer services at the St. George in Tampa and St. Mary and St. Mina in Clearwater, and also a beautiful church in Newport Richey. They're gorgeous Coptic churches with thriving congregations. As a member of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and now co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Caucus, I have worked to protect religious minorities throughout the world, from the Falun Gong in China to the Ahmadi in Pakistan to the Baha'is in Iran. However, the suffering and persecution of Christians in the Middle East, specifically Egypt, is alarming. While there has been a decrease in radical Islamist violence and anti-Christian mob attacks. Continued, systematic, and pervasive religious discrimination against the Copts continues to result in the suffering and persecution of Copts purely because of their benefits. The right to worship must be protected in the Middle East and North Africa, starting with Egypt. Coptic Christians are Egyptians and should not be pushed from their ancestral homeland just because of their religion. Egypt's Christian community, an estimated 10% of the population, can trace its roots back to Egypt for over 2,000 years. In some Egyptian communities, Christians still make up at least 40% of the population. Egypt needs to fully embrace a modern secular system of government and eradicate the institutionalized discrimination against Coptic Christians. Likewise, we must not let Syrian Christians, Sudanese Christians, I had the opportunity to visit Sudan, and others across the Middle East, Africa, and Eurasia be pushed from or intimidated in their homelands. I had an opportunity to speak to President Trump with regard to this subject matter. We must not, and I know the president's no longer there, but I mean, we had a nice conversation, and he understood where we stood on these particular issues. We must not let Christians face execution for their benefits. We need to stand up even to our allies and international partners and let them know that the United States will not ignore crimes against humanity. While we may not be able to snuff out all of the local violence, persecution, and discrimination all of the time, we can surely work to extinguish international difference. I had the opportunity to speak with the patriarch from Alexandria in the Greek Orthodox Church, of course in Egypt, and all of Africa. And he gave me some good information and told me how we can be helpful with regard to this. So we're all in this together. We must speak out about the danger Christians in the Arab world face, because we know there are few, if any, protectors or allies to be found. So we have a duty and obligation to help our brothers and sisters. We're so very fortunate here in the United States to have religious freedom, and we need to spread religious freedom throughout the world. So thank you, and God bless you, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity.
Friends, I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you as we recognize the 7th annual Modern Coptic Martyrs Remembrance Day. And I want to thank you for your continued advocacy on behalf of vulnerable communities. Over the last decade, Coptic Christians have suffered too many tragedies in places like Cairo, Tanta, Alexandria, and Minya. Churches and cathedrals, houses of peace, have regularly been targeted by radical extremists acting out of hate. And Coptic Christians continue to be marginalized as a matter of policy, ensuring that this community remains a target for acts of violence and harassment. The continued persecution of Coptic Christians is an affront to human rights and to all those that value the freedom to practice their religious beliefs without fear of harm or prejudice. Ensuring that Coptic Christians in Egypt and around the world are able to live and worship in peace is vital as we seek to build a global community that respects and values religions and religious freedom for all. I've proudly worked with my House colleagues from both sides of the aisle to shine a light on the violence committed against Coptic Christians and to ensure that the government and the people of Egypt know that the United States continues to prioritize global human rights, including the freedom to worship. We have a responsibility to work with our partners here in the United States and around the world to address human rights abuses wherever and whenever they occur, and I remain committed to educating my colleagues about the persecution your community faces. Thank you again for this opportunity to share a few thoughts. I hope that this Remembrance Day serves as a renewed call for sustained advocacy in the pursuit of lasting peace. I wish you all well in 2022 and 2023 and look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead.
Hello, I'm Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts, and I thank Coptic Solidarity for the invitation to say a few words in honor of the 7th Annual Modern Coptic Martyrs Remembrance Day. As a practicing Catholic myself, I am deeply aware of the important role that faith plays in our lives. My faith provides my moral compass, and it is one of the reasons that I believe so strongly in universal human rights. I'm privileged to live in a country where historically we have understood that the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion only exists for one of us if it exists for all of us. It is because the founders understood this basic truth that the very First Amendment to our Constitution prohibits the government from establishing an official religion. It is really hard to truly protect and guarantee freedom of religion when one religion is elevated above all others. The situation in Egypt is different. Egypt's constitution makes Islam the state religion, even though the constitution also guarantees freedom of religion. As Coptic Solidarity's own staff have pointed out in recent commentaries, this built-in institutional tension has not been overcome. I mention this because I sense frustration that, on the one hand, President el-Sisi gets credit for things like publicly promoting religious tolerance and attending a Coptic Christmas liturgy. On the other hand, there are still acts of violence against individual Coptics, and institutional changes like eliminating the requirement that national identity cards list a person's religion have not been made. In fact, anytime discrimination based on religion is incorporated into a country's laws, policies, and institutions, we have a real problem. We've seen the consequences of institutionalized discrimination for people's lives all around the world. The Uyghurs and Tibetans in China, the Rohingya in Burma, the Shia in Bahrain, Catholics in Northern Ireland, the list is long. So as you gather today to celebrate the memory of Coptic victims of religious discrimination in Egypt, I urge you to keep up your good fight against laws and policies that put the power of government behind any particular religion. Those of us who truly believe in the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion must never forget that unless that right exists for all of us, it exists for none of us. I wish you a very successful conference today and look forward to hearing about your conclusions. Thank you.